All of our narratives are created for the sole purpose of providing entertainment. When I was 17 years of age, I relocated to a different state shortly before my final year of high school. It was there that I met my wife, who is the same age as me. Just a few weeks into the academic year, she became my first girlfriend. In fact, she was the only girlfriend I ever had. I was so infatuated with her that it did not take long for me to fall deeply in love with her. We spent 8 years together, but we both knew that we were going to get married after just a couple of years. We had this idea that given that we had met at the age of 17, we decided to allow ourselves a period of growth and maturation before proceeding to marriage. Consequently, we did not enter into the institution of matrimony until we had been together for 18 years and had been living as a couple for over 26 years. During this time, we had established a successful business and were able to live in a variety of locations. As the business was based at home, my wife contributed to it on an occasional basis, but primarily relied on my income. I was not opposed to this arrangement. I had grown up with the expectation that a man should be the primary breadwinner in a family. Like any couple, we experienced a range of challenges and difficulties, but we persevered. In 2015, my mother was diagnosed with cancer, and within a year, she had passed away. This was followed by the death of my father just 9 months later. Additionally, our business ceased operations in late 2019, resulting in the filing for bankruptcy in early 2020. During this period, I experienced a significant decline in mood and emotional well-being. Dealing with depression for an extended period, I found solace in my marriage. However, with our business failing, my wife was compelled to seek employment to maintain our financial stability. She secured a position at a prominent retail establishment and eventually ascended to a managerial role. Despite my best efforts, I found myself gaining an additional 100 pounds over a few years. Consequently, I am now dealing with a number of challenges, including being overweight, the collapse of my business, and a sense of being at rock bottom. When the pandemic began to surge and the lockdowns were imposed, I became increasingly isolated because I have my wife, on the other hand, continued to work throughout this period, despite her own health issues. She began to work late shifts and, on her days off, would frequently visit Target and shop. These activities, which she continued during the lockdowns, now appear to be indicative of a concerning pattern. On one particular Sunday morning, she woke me up at the crack of dawn, at approximately 6, the time is midnight. She informed me that she was going for a walk in the park because her legs felt restless. I found this somewhat peculiar, but I had previously experienced similar sensations due to restless leg syndrome, so I did not think much of it. It was not a significant issue. She returned home, we had breakfast, she took a shower, and then she went to the bedroom. I followed her because our sexual activity had previously been quite active. In the course of the day, she expressed enthusiasm for a sexual act, but I detected an unusual odor, so I withheld my participation. I assumed that the aroma was merely the result of her morning walk in the park. At that time, I was not concerned about the possibility of infidelity on her part. However, a sense of unease began to emerge the following day. I accessed her browsing history and discovered that she had visited the Facebook pages of several individuals I knew who were not employed at the same establishment. This information prompted me to question whether she had formed inappropriate connections outside of her professional circle. On the following day, my thoughts remained preoccupied with the incident. The date in question was the 22nd of July, 2020, approximately 3, the time is midnight. I awoke with the intention of retrieving her mobile phone and perusing its contents. I remained in bed for a period of time, contemplating whether it was worth getting up due to my fatigue. Eventually, I procured her phone, though I was uncertain as to the specific information I was seeking. Almost immediately, I located the Snapchat application, which I was previously unaware she had. She has 3 male acquaintances, 2 of whom I had observed on her Facebook profile. This individual, despite her denials, has a professional relationship with her. One morning, she awoke and inquired about my well-being. I mustered the courage to inquire about her infidelity. She denied it. We conversed for several hours and I then discovered that I could download her Snapchat history. I locked myself in a bedroom and accessed it. She pleaded with me not to admit to the infidelity. The discovery of infidelity has a profound impact on one's sense of self and worldview. The pain associated with betrayal is a phenomenon that can only be fully grasped by those who have experienced it. At the time of my lowest ebb, when I needed my wife's support the most, she chose to deny the allegations. However, the evidence was overwhelming. She was the primary breadwinner in our marriage, a fact that she conveniently overlooked while highlighting her role in supporting our family. Furthermore, she has recently asserted that she is not materialistic. This is somewhat surprising, given her apparent penchant for shopping. It would appear that she has been unfaithful to me on numerous occasions. The two men with whom she was involved are both financially unstable. One individual even borrowed money from my wife. I will provide further details on this later. The other individual resides in a dilapidated trailer owned by a relative. This is likely due to his poor credit score, which prevents him from renting independently. He has been convicted of over 10 driving under the influence (DUI) offenses. I contacted both men on Facebook, informing them of the circumstances and sharing details about each other. It is noteworthy that they became visibly upset. She was unfaithful to me with multiple partners, not just these two. One of the men did not respond, while the other, who had stolen money from me, subsequently expressed a desire to engage in a physical altercation with me at a later point in time. I have learned that he is fixated on confronting me and has repeatedly informed my wife of his intention to engage in a slow-paced physical confrontation. However, she eventually begins to admit to certain things, but it is a slow and arduous process. I inquired about the use of protection, and she responded in a nonchalant manner, stating that it is a common practice in today's society. She makes it seem as if it was not a significant event, nothing extraordinary, just contact, but nothing like what we had on the day I discovered the infidelity. I requested that she send a message to each individual involved, indicating that the relationship was over. It took her 7 hours to send those messages, which I found to be an excessive amount of time. I sent her several messages and I was practically begging her to do it later. I asked her 8 questions about what they did, and she only admitted to 2 of them. We both went and got tested for STDs, and luckily, we both came out clean. I remember a few weeks before I found out, she wanted me to please her, and I noticed something down there. I made a face and she freaked out, running to the bathroom and claiming it was just I am not experiencing any distress, but I must admit that I find this situation rather unpleasant. It is particularly troubling that she requested this after becoming involved with another partner. I have considered the possibility that she may have engaged in this practice on 2 other occasions, given my own history of engaging in similar activities with her. It is difficult to comprehend how someone could engage in such a practice after becoming involved with another partner. It is simply revolting. I am curious as to whether this is something she has done with other partners. Was it intended to arouse me, or does she have such little respect for me that she would ask for that knowing I would be clueless? Alternatively, perhaps it was some twisted thing they all discussed, some sort of perverse thrill they derive from it. Her excuses were all over the place, and she claimed that she did not love me anymore. However, this was clearly untrue, as she had missed out on her wild college years and we were no longer making each other happy. This was a complete shock to me and to her. She did not discuss the matter with me. Her siblings were promiscuous and she craved attention. Company influenced her in a negative way, and there were several other factors that I do not recall at this time. The following few weeks were distressing, as she apologized and claimed that she never wanted to leave me. She said that she had not considered the consequences of her actions and that she had acted on impulse. This was hurtful to me, as she did not consider the impact of her behavior on our marriage. Furthermore, she caused me significant distress by engaging in sexual intercourse with both men. One of them even expressed admiration for my marriage, suggesting that I was unfaithful. In response, she asserted that my husband would never engage in infidelity. The irony of this situation is painful. He then inquired about my response if I discovered their affair. She replied that he would end his life. This revelation caused me immense anguish. She then dismissed the incident with a joke, which only intensified my distress. She dismisses it as a joke, but this does not mitigate the impact of her actions. In fact, it may exacerbate the situation. She is joking about ending the relationship while she engages in sexual activity with another man. Furthermore, she has the audacity to suggest that my husband will never divorce me. 2 weeks later, I reached a breaking point. I decided to end the relationship. I wrote a note and took a picture of it, which I sent to her. She became distressed and contacted the authorities. The police were called and I was apprehended and taken to the hospital. I was subsequently released after a few months. I attempted to end the situation on numerous occasions, researching methods of doing so online. However, I was unable to proceed with the actions. I am now grateful for that decision. There is life after this. It transpired that she had not severed contact with either of the other men. Fortunately, it seemed that one of them had already moved on. The other individual is no longer in contact with her, but she is in regular communication with him. This is largely due to the fact that she provided him with financial assistance and now seeks the repayment of that money. I advise her to simply let the matter rest, but she is adamant that she cannot do so. I have informed her that the issue extends beyond mere finances, but she has rejected this assertion. She is unaware that I have access to her Facebook account and have been reading her messages with the aforementioned individual. He eventually blocked her, but she recalls that she has his phone number and texts him from work. They engage in a significant verbal altercation, during which he explicitly requests a sexual encounter with her. She responds with a tentative maybe, which is revealed to me through her boasting to a friend on FB Messenger. I inquire about her intentions with this individual, to which she responds in the negative. However, I then highlight the fact that I viewed her phone without disclosing to her that I had her Facebook password. She eventually divulged the information, which caused me considerable frustration. I became enraged and struck a hole through the bedroom door. She agreed to wait until Friday to receive payment from the other individual, but after 6 weeks, he stated that he would not fulfill the obligation. This seemed to be the point at which she emerged from her state of confusion. She asserted that she felt liberated. In retrospect, I believe that I should have terminated the relationship at that juncture, even at the point of no contact. The sudden collapse of one's world can be challenging to navigate, particularly when it persists for an extended period. In my case, the subsequent 8 months were characterized by frequent conflict. I continued to uncover evidence, prompting me to persistently investigate. She would admit to only those actions that I could substantiate, which, when viewed collectively, painted a picture of her involvement. She would profess remorse, yet I remained unable to reconcile her actions with my understanding of her character. Without her, we opted to commence marriage counseling, but it proved to be an unbearable experience due to the necessity of discussing her infidelity. Consequently, we terminated the counseling approximately 1 month later. I subsequently discovered her diary, which detailed the dates, descriptions of sexual encounters with various men, and her level of enjoyment. I had previously inquired about the specifics of these encounters, and her responses were inconsistent with the diary's contents. The aforementioned 8 instances were not a significant shock, and it is evident from her diary that she did not use protection. In fact, she even documented the locations on her body to which each man had ejaculated. When I expressed my distress about this, she attempted to minimize its importance and stated that I was more upset about the situation than providing support. Additionally, I discovered that she had taken a pregnancy test approximately 2 weeks before I became aware of the full extent of the situation. She asserts that the purpose was merely to ascertain whether she was pregnant, but the revelation caused significant distress given our inability to conceive children. 2 weeks after my hospitalization, I discovered that she had written in her diary that she still desired to engage in sexual intercourse with the individual who had stolen the money, despite her previous actions. Despite her public contrition and professions of love, she privately harbored resentment and a sense of entitlement. She believed I would never leave her and that she could act with impunity. Unfortunately, her expectations were not entirely unfounded. In late March 2021, she proposed a trial separation, which I reluctantly accepted. Furthermore, she plans to relocate to her brother's residence, situated 8 hours away in another state, for a period of 2 to 3 months. However, on the day of my relocation, I am unable to bring myself to depart. She then suggests that I at least visit my brother for a few days, believing that this might be sufficient. I agree to this proposal. I leave on a Tuesday, and my birthday falls on a Wednesday. We maintain communication throughout this period. Throughout the day, she sends me messages via text, calls me, and uses FaceTime. She expresses her feelings of longing for me, love for me, and desire for me to be her husband. On my birthday, I go out for pizza with a childhood friend. I am supposed to call her when I leave, but she texts me to say that she is going to work out and walk the dogs. She requests that I call her later, so I decide to call her later while I am driving back to my brother's place. We converse and I inform her that my acquaintance has offered counsel, prompting my realization that I am desirous of repairing our matrimony as I am not prepared to consider any other option. She inquires as to whether I am prepared to abandon the past. I confirm that I am. I return on Saturday and, for reasons that remain unclear, I decide to peruse her emails. She has cleared her inbox and deleted all messages, but I access the important folder on my birthday at 7, the total number of pages is 37. 5 p.m. Subsequently, she deactivated her iPhone tracking and engaged in sexual intercourse with the individual who had misappropriated the funds. This prompted her to send me a text message stating that she was preoccupied and requesting that I call her later. This was my second significant shock. I sent her a text message while she was at work, inquiring about her rationale for committing this act on my birthday. She responded that we would discuss the matter when she returned home. I became enraged and proceeded to her workplace, where I verbally expressed my distress and created a commotion. In front of her colleagues, I am now perceived as the irrational husband, and they are likely to understand why she would cheat. 2 days later, I file for divorce, and a week after that, I move to my brother's. I take our dogs and leave behind our other belongings, including our children, with the hope that we might reconcile in the future. However, I would have to be amenable to her seeing other men during the forthcoming 8 months. She persistently contacts me by text, telephone, and video call, reiterating her love and expressing remorse. Nevertheless, she never explicitly states her desire to reconcile. Despite being divorced, I am still optimistic that we will remarry. We arrange to meet at the weekend, 5 months later, at a location midway between our respective residences. We engage in a brief but passionate kiss. I am compelled to engage in sexual intercourse with her. I am aware that this is an immoral act, given that she is the only sexual partner I have ever had. I was taught that sexual intercourse should only occur within the context of a marriage. However, I find myself longing to recapture that emotional connection. We begin to engage in sexual intimacy, but she suddenly stops me. She states that it was challenging for her to resist my advances, yet I am unable to ignore the fact that it was not difficult for her to resist her boyfriends. I have chosen to refer to them as such. I subsequently experienced a sense of distress, but this gradually abated. I planned another visit after Christmas, but she made it clear that our perspectives were no longer aligned. She had previously suggested that we might remarry, but now she was indicating otherwise. Consequently, I cancelled the trip on the Tuesday after Christmas when I would have been visiting. She sent me an unexpected text message expressing her thoughts and feelings. I did not respond. I finally accessed the Reddit platform and began perusing the forums. I read a book by Chump Lady, which significantly altered my outlook. I have ceased all communication with her and feel positive about never speaking to her again. After reading the book, it became evident that she engaged in all the typical behaviors of an unfaithful partner. She is not exceptional or complex, she is merely superficial and self-absorbed. The need for attention was prioritized over the stability of the marriage, with no regard for the damage caused. 10 days later, she sent a text simply to say hello, but it is likely that there was more to it than that. A week later, she sent another text inquiring about my well-being. She even called me a couple of days ago, but I did not answer. I am aware that I should block her number, but I have been unable to do so thus far. However, I have not yet reached the point of in the 36 days since the separation, I have learned that she has maxed out her credit cards and is experiencing financial difficulties. In contrast, I have secured employment in a field that I find fulfilling and have even initiated a new business venture. Despite starting from scratch, I believe I am on a trajectory towards contentment, even in the absence of a romantic partner. However, I do regret not having left her immediately. Regardless of one's circumstances, it is not possible to alter the past. It is acceptable to experience uncertainty and to take time to navigate the complexities of a divorce. I have found a sense of peace in the absence of daily concerns and the need to monitor her phone and computer activity. She is now free to pursue her own path, and while she may not have cared about my feelings, I have come to accept that as a consequence of her actions. I had initially believed that I was losing her, but I have since realized that I have gained a sense of self-respect and clarity. Those who engage in infidelity often display a lack of integrity, morals and character, and I have come to view this as a positive outcome. It is challenging to comprehend if one does not share my perspective. I previously believed that she had merely erred and desired to salvage our marriage. However, when she initiated romantic overtures and engaged in extramarital relationships, she effectively terminated our union. I assumed that we were a unified entity and that I was her primary objective. Consequently, I anticipated that she would eventually recognize my significance. However, once an individual engages in infidelity, the partnership is no longer characterized by mutuality. This realization is difficult to accept, yet it is a fundamental truth. I am curious whether she ever during the 26 years we were together, she engaged in infidelity. Given that we worked from home frequently, it is unclear how she could have met someone else. However, this remains a mystery. I have learned that it is more important to observe one's actions than to believe their words. Despite her claims of love, I was naive enough to believe her while she continued her illicit activities. She believes that I stayed because although she exhibited certain admirable qualities, I ultimately remained with her because of my own personal traits, namely my loyalty. It was not her intrinsic value that prompted me to stay, but rather my own sense of commitment and fidelity. In retrospect, I realize that she did not possess any exceptional qualities. In fact, she was quite flawed. My second encounter with a future spouse, Amber, also occurred by chance. I was working on a project at a friend's house when I encountered a young woman. After concluding our project, the women proceeded to prepare a meal with the assistance of their neighbor, who was seeking guidance on a sophisticated recipe. This was the occasion on which I first made the acquaintance of Amber. I was 20 years of age at the time, while she was 21. Our courtship spanned a period of 1 year, after which we were married. We subsequently took up residence in my late grandmother's apartment, which my parents had bequeathed to us. The period following the wedding was characterized by financial constraints, with both parties engaged in job searches and with limited financial resources. However, they were able to navigate this period successfully, with Amber securing a suitable position that utilized her skills and my own employment also becoming more stable. As our circumstances became more secure, we began discussing the possibility of starting a family. Amber expressed a preference for having a boy and a girl, but was concerned about the potential impact of health issues on her ability to have healthy children. Despite our preparations for pregnancy, including attending courses, visiting doctors and undergoing regular tests, Amber's views on having children changed significantly. She advised us to postpone having children, citing our age and the perceived availability of time as reasons for this decision. Instead, she suggested that we should prioritize improving our living situation, including acquiring a larger property with sufficient space for our growing family. I was initially supportive, but her abrupt change of heart initially perplexed me. Subsequently, a series of unusual occurrences aroused my suspicion. Amber's online activity, which had previously been unrestricted, suddenly became confined to her work laptop, which she password protected along with her phone. This shift coincided with the emergence of communication challenges and the discovery of secrets. Despite these developments, our daily routine remained uninterrupted. To conclude, our daily lives remained largely unchanged, but the situation began to affect our sleeping patterns. Amber frequently returned home after work, often appearing exhausted and sometimes not even going to bed, but instead working on her laptop. I attempted to initiate an open discussion about the situation, but it quickly escalated into a heated argument, with Amber accusing me of disrespecting her work. I was left uncertain as to the true nature of the conflict. Subsequently, I discovered that the root cause was not related to her professional responsibilities. I typically do not return home for lunch, but on that occasion, I decided to leave work early after obtaining permission from my supervisor. My wife was not scheduled to work that day, and I assumed that I had intended to surprise her. I had purchased flowers and planned to take her out for a quiet lunch, with the hope of engaging in a meaningful conversation. However, upon entering the premises, I immediately discerned that something was amiss in the kitchen. Amber and her companion were visibly distressed and hastily attempted to. Upon my arrival, I observed that both women were attired, though their attire was in a state of disarray. Without any prior indication, Amber informed me that it was time for an honest conversation. I was taken aback by her audacity and the detached manner in which she conveyed this request. I became enraged and demanded that both women leave the premises. I am unsure of the exact sequence of events that transpired, but I recall shouting a multitude of insults at both of them. In my anger and hurt, we were all standing there facing off. The man attempted to say something, perhaps to calm me down, but I was not amenable to such an approach. I shoved his hand away and landed a couple of punches on him. However, Amber intervened to defend him. At this point, she revealed that she informed me that she was intending to terminate our relationship and subsequently pursue a romantic involvement with this other individual. She proceeded to allege that I lacked the requisite qualifications to reside in this country, despite my having been resident here for several years. She also stated that she had been in love with this other person for a considerable period of time and that he was currently in the country with the intention of taking her back to Spain with him. I conducted a brief appraisal of this individual. He appeared to be over the age of 40 and was not particularly physically attractive, but he was dressed in expensive clothes and seemed to be a wealthy man who had recently become involved with a younger woman. At that moment, I was reminded of an incident that had occurred a few days earlier when I had discovered a couple of books in her underwear drawer. One of these books was an English-Spanish phrase book, another entirely in Spanish, and a textbook for learning Spanish from scratch were also present. In the past, I was merely taken aback but did not consider the matter significant. Perhaps my wife aspired to learn a new language and subsequently embark on a trip with me to Spain or another Spanish-speaking destination during our vacation. However, I now comprehend the significance of those secret messages. My foreign language books were likely the subject of them as a result of her lover's actions. I feel foolish for not recognizing this sooner. It transpired that they were awaiting my return home from work that evening to deliver the information that they had been writing letters for approximately 1 year and had been clandestinely dating my wife for almost a month was revealed to me. She informed me that she had developed a strong affection for this individual, whom she had met online. They had fallen in love and he had traveled to meet her. He appeared to be an admirable person, surpassing me in numerous ways. He was polite, kind and chivalrous. She had expressed her intention to travel to Spain with him and to reside in the city of Malaga. She had informed me that the divorce papers were prepared and that I could sign them immediately. She had already signed hers. She had gathered the essential items for the short term and I was instructed to dispose of them. The remainder of the narrative is omitted here as it is of a highly personal nature. In summary, the lover promised to purchase new items for her and they were due to fly out in 2 weeks. Tickets had already been purchased and the couple had heard this information. The author's response was to punch the Spaniard in the stomach several times, which caused him to leave the house. The author's main source of distress was the nerve of the other party, who attempted to reprimand the author for his actions without uttering a word. The author then grabbed her by the hair and shoved her out the door, slamming it in her face. Shortly thereafter, her suitcases were thrown in a similar manner. This occurred because she began yelling that she would call the police if he did not return them. I did not return them. I did not regret my behavior in the slightest, indeed, I had to restrain myself from physically assaulting Amber. If a lover is so well off, he should be able to provide her with a hotel room and allow her to live with him. I contacted my place of work immediately and took a week off, even though it meant paying. I informed my superior of my divorce from my wife. He was understanding and accommodating. I proceeded to the establishment where I had previously scheduled a dinner date with my colleague. Instead of using the funds I had set aside for that purpose, I purchased alcoholic beverages and food. I consumed these for 3 consecutive days. During the period of my leave, I spent a significant amount of time at home, engaging in little to no productive activity. I was consumed by a multitude of thoughts and emotions which made it challenging for me to focus on anything else. By the end of my leave, I had reached a point where I was finally able to accept the reality of my marriage dissolution. Despite the immense pain I was experiencing, I came to realize that it was a more favorable outcome than continuing to endure an endless ordeal. I had not anticipated the deceit and betrayal from my wife. One might assume that my story would have reached its conclusion at this point. However, life often defies our expectations. 3 weeks had passed since I had kicked my wife and her lover out of the house. I had just returned home from work, anticipating a meal and some leisure time with a beverage. However, the doorbell rang and my wife was standing there. She did not delay and immediately requested a serious discussion. I invited her in and agreed to the proposal. "If we have to," I inquired, with a smirk. I'm at a loss for words. It transpired that this Spaniard had more than just my wife on his radar in America. In addition to her, he had 7 other women, but ultimately chose someone else, not my wife. He subsequently flew off to Spain with a 19-year-old. A year-long relationship, the woman left my wife high and dry, taking with him all her money and expensive jewelry. Consequently, my wife spent a whole week living with her mother and pondering the situation. She came to realize the extent of her loss by leaving me and that she could not live without me. She made a confession, with tears in her eyes, that she had made a mistake. She acknowledged that her actions were a significant error in judgment and expressed genuine remorse. She was willing to accept responsibility for her actions and work towards reconciliation. She even expressed a desire to have children with me and agreed to the terms I proposed. However, she was curious about whether I had actually signed the divorce papers. I informed her that I would consider the possibility of a divorce, but that I had not yet signed the relevant documents. I then instructed her to leave the premises, as I had arranged to meet other women at my residence. Her response to this unexpected turn of events was notable. The reaction of the woman in question was, in this author's opinion, priceless. Despite the fact that the aforementioned prank was, in fact, a complete fabrication, this author did not experience any remorse for playing it. In fact, this author was firmly resolved to pursue a divorce when his wife returned 3 weeks later. At that point, this author was already in the process of signing the necessary paperwork and sending it to the court. The woman in question seemed to explode with emotion at that moment. She conceded that her actions had been a significant misstep and that she was reluctant to lose me. She embraced me and shed genuine tears, a stark contrast to her previous displays of emotion. Despite a certain degree of empathy, I was unable to reconcile the breach of trust and the deceit. I was reluctant to forgive the betrayal and doubted my capacity to do so. Following the dissolution of the marriage, I experienced a sense of liberation and a renewed sense of autonomy. I discovered that I still retained ownership of my grandmother's apartment, affording me a convenient and secluded place to reside for a period of time. Despite this, Amber persisted in her attempts to regain my affections, perhaps with the hope of reviving our relationship. It was evident that reconciliation was not a viable option. She eventually relocated to her parents' residence, effectively terminating our communication. I have not given much thought to her current circumstances. I am still in the early stages of my life, and I believe it is prudent to focus on my own growth and development. Story 3, we have been together for 15 years, married for 7, and just recently. On Sunday, I discovered that my partner had been unfaithful with a man she had met less than 5 months ago. This information was even revealed to me as recently as tonight. Despite this, I am currently managing to cope. I have been gathering all the crucial documents and financial information. I opened a new bank account just for me and transferred a substantial amount of cash into it to ensure that I am financially secure. She will not take everything we have. I had a lengthy discussion with my father, who experienced a comparable situation many years ago. He provided me with invaluable counsel and insight. I intend to initiate divorce proceedings, and I am confident that she will not oppose it once she recognizes the financial implications of doing so. I am attempting to mediate. I selected Friday to deliver the news because it is a long weekend, which will afford her the opportunity to pack her essential belongings and depart while I relocate to another residence. I have been contemplating the manner in which I will communicate with her. One aspect of me is inclined to lash out and express every harsh sentiment I have been harboring, allowing her to experience the full extent of my displeasure. However, I am then prompted to recall my father's advice, which was to be the bigger person. He suggested that I allow her to speak her piece, to listen attentively and to conduct the conversation in a calm and composed manner, as though we were two adults. He emphasized the importance of avoiding any displays of anger or resentment, and of ensuring that I did not regret my actions later on. I find myself in a state of internal conflict. On the one hand, I am tempted to unleash my pent-up anger and frustration. I am conflicted about whether to express my anger towards her for what I perceive to be a betrayal of trust. While I believe that expressing my feelings might help me to move on, I am also conscious of the advice my father gave me, namely that this might be our last meaningful conversation. I am concerned that if I do express my feelings, she will perceive me as the better person, the one she is losing, who listened to her and did not judge her. I am unsure whether I should take this opportunity to tell her more than I could ever say to her face. However, if she truly does not care, it may not make any difference at all. On the day of the confrontation, I followed advice I had found online and decided to be straightforward, not cruel, not sympathetic, but direct. I was not in the right frame of mind for a conversation, so I wrote her a letter instead. The letter essentially conveyed the following: I am aware of your extramarital affair. Our marriage is effectively over. My decision is final. Do not attempt to contact me. I will contact you when I am ready. I expect you to have departed by the time I return. I subsequently came to understand that my initial inclination towards either being harsh or conciliatory was merely driven by a desire to elicit a response from her. However, I have since realized that this was merely a means of procuring a reaction, and that it was not a constructive approach. Her reaction would have been inconsequential, it would not have altered the necessity of my actions. Therefore, I left the letter and departed for the weekend. Upon my return, she was still present. I informed her that I was not prepared to engage in discourse and, following an extended period of emotional distress, she departed to reside with a friend. Since that time, I have been preoccupied with the establishment of my new life. I have commenced employment in March and am currently seeking alternative accommodation. I have separated a significant portion of our finances to protect myself in the event that she attempts to misappropriate them. I have completed the divorce papers, which require only to be stamped and served. Last Friday, I met with her to discuss the details of the separation. Despite the circumstances, I still care about her and I am aware that the divorce will have a significant impact on her. She relies on me for a range of essential services, including health insurance and rent. The dissolution of our marriage has caused her considerable distress. I maintained my composure, as I have done throughout this process. I informed her that I would reach out when I was ready to talk. I initially ceased communication when I was ready to talk again. However, she unexpectedly contacted me yesterday, seeking to converse and persuade me to reconsider. I eventually managed to convey my feelings when I explained that I needed time to heal independently and that her involvement would be unhelpful. She acknowledged that if this was what I needed to find happiness, she would respect my decision to withdraw. We engaged in a lengthy discussion, during which she accepted responsibility for her actions without attempting to assign blame to me. I was not yet prepared to delve into the specifics of her affair, and she respected my need for space. However, she provided answers to all my questions with sincerity. We conversed in the manner of a couple who are open and honest with one another. I am confident that she was being truthful because I am intimately acquainted with her, which makes this situation particularly challenging. It was not a complete stranger with whom I was speaking, it was her, the person I have known intimately for 15 years. I was unable to comprehend the situation. The question of why or how she could do this to us is a difficult one to answer. It might sound typical, but she was the last person I ever expected to betray me in this way. Those I have confided in about this were just as stunned and baffled as I was. We ended the conversation last night on a sad but peaceful note. I agreed with her. I suggested that she could come by today to pick up more of her belongings, but today everything shifted for me. She arrived at my residence and we conversed further. I informed her of how I had discovered her infidelity. She had been absent for several months, returning home inebriated on a near-nightly basis and consuming even more alcohol once inside. I then observed that her phone messages were set to content hidden, which led me to suspect that something was amiss. One evening after she had become unconscious, I accessed her phone and discovered messages with a contact saved under the name of a deceased artist. It was evident that this was a fictitious name, and the messages were explicit and had been sent over a period of several months. I was convinced that she was unfaithful. She would meet up with this man after work and return home late. The content of the messages made it evident to me that divorce was the only viable option. When I informed her of these details, her demeanor shifted. She expressed remorse, but in a different manner. She acknowledged that there was more to the story than just the messages. She admitted that the first incident was her fault and that she felt terrible about it. She vowed never to let it happen again. However, she then stated that the second incident was different. He forced himself on her and held her down. While she screamed no, she stated that she was unsure if what occurred could be classified as assault, as she attributed her involvement in the situation to her own actions. To cope with the situation, she continued the affair to avoid feeling used or like a victim. Initially, I was skeptical of her claims. However, after reviewing a diary entry from that period, my perspective shifted. The entry provided insight into her thoughts and feelings, which led me to believe that she was being truthful. I began to understand the complexities of her psychological state, which may have contributed to her continued involvement in the affair and sudden onset of alcohol dependency. The subject was overwhelmed by feelings of shame and lacked a reliable source of support. She was unable to reconcile her experiences with the notion of assault, instead attributing them to her own flawed state of mind. This allowed her to avoid confronting the possibility that she might have been a victim. She had not previously disclosed this information. Prior to this, I was not prepared to consider the specifics of the situation. However, she has since acknowledged the wrongfulness of her actions. Once again, the circumstances have taken an unexpected turn. It seems that there is no viable legal avenue to pursue in relation to our relationship. I had been contemplating filing for divorce, despite. This meant losing the most important person in my life. I had assumed she was simply acting out of selfishness and seeking pleasure, but I have since come to understand the nuances of the situation. While her initial decision cannot be justified, her subsequent actions have become more comprehensible to me. I am uncertain about the best course of action moving forward. Perhaps I could forgive her, but I am uncertain. I am still grappling with the repercussions of her actions, yet I am even more distressed by what befell her. I still hold affection for her, but I am unsure if that is sufficient to remain together. I am apprehensive about making a decision, even if it is ultimately regrettable. However, I am uncertain about the nature of the decision that would be most regrettable. I would like to clarify that I am not seeking sympathy for myself or my wife. I am aware that my belief in her account may appear misguided to some, yet I am inclined to believe her, despite reservations. I find it more plausible that this incident occurred than that she fabricated such a complex narrative. The incident is still very recent, having occurred only a few hours ago. I may have acted prematurely in posting about it. Please feel free to share your thoughts on the matter. I am open to hearing them, but I would like to make it clear that I am not being naive or attempting to overdramatize the situation. My aim is simply to engage in a constructive dialogue and gain insight.